Only us are on here? Oh, wow. I guess oh, wow. It's early. Bedroom me right now. Why are we just smiling? What's that? Oh, that was nothing.
Let's see.
How early does Colin usually get on?
There we go.
Colin got on first today.
Say hi.
I got on second.
No, I did.
No, I did.
No, I think Lexi did.
Lexi?
And then
Where?
and then Abigail, and then
Where's Lexi?
She's on there. She's not showing her face yet. There it is.
Where? Boy. Blue.
Miss Snider, when I joined, I only saw you.
Well, usually you can only see me when you first come on. Everybody thinks
Oh! Sarah hit my camera right there.
No, I saw you, me, and only Collins. That's all I saw.
well, and you might have been earlier than I knew. So today my lesson is pretty much inspired by Eli Allen.
Whoa. Hold on.
I think
How's
this
the lesson
lesson
inspired?
for Eli Allen.
Okay. What is it about?
You shall see.
I hate surprise. Well, I love surprises and I hate them. I'm not good at waiting.
You're not. This is about a subject that Eli and I share.
Reading?
Yes.
Of course, it's going to be about reading.
It's all about books.
My mom.
Are we having a virtual book fair?
Yes. It's all about my favorite books.
Miss Snider.
Eli, guess what? This lesson is for you.
Miss Snider,
Yes,
I am really tired, so I might leave a little early. Like
I'm just getting on my bed.
like maybe 1:45.
Okay.
You just scoot all the way over and you share the room, everybody.
Might miss out something fun. Okay. Jason.
I'm wearing my jammies. Okay, sit down. Dinosaur. I'm gonna go get Cece down for a nap, okay? Okay.
Here comes Ella.
Siri.
That's
Did y'all hear that?
Can you hear the ding dong bell?
No, could y'all hear like the Siri thing?
No.
Oh, good.
But when somebody comes and joins us, can you hear the doorbell ring?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
There we go.
Hi, Mason.
I thought I heard the doorbell noise, but it was just my brother in his game.
Well, when one of y'all joins the meeting, mine goes ding dong. Did you know that?
Oh. No.
I built this Lego car thing, and it turns like into a hovercraft. And then my brother got this Lego Ninjago thing, and it's a motorcycle that turns into a hovercraft, but it broke, so I use it as I used several different pieces plus the wheels to make like a jukebox, and it's really cool. Man, back in Windsor. Also, Abigail looks kind of weird with that background. We can't see her mouth. We can only see her eyes, and the rest of her face.
I built the Lego Millennium Falcon in only 2 days. It could have been one, but I started it at night. I started it late at night, really late.
Once I
That's
built,
the only reason.
Have you, Miss Snyder?
I built
Have you
dolphins.
Miss Snyder, have you ever seen The Never-Ending Story?
Yeah.
It's a movie. We watched it last night because we've been staying up till 9 o'clock lately.
Well,
Yay, watching
fun
movies.
to do when it's almost summertime, because summer is the time when you can kind of change the schedule, right?
I watched King Arthur and the Sword in the Stone.
the Willoughbys.
David,
Oh, the Willoughbys.
Do you know if we didn't get to hatch the chicks this year, we could all the third grade classes could partner up with the second grade class to do the chick thing?
I like the idea. I'll see if I can make something happen with that.
Liam, once normally I have help with my brother finding pieces, but he's not a very big guy.
People.
This time where there was like a bunch of pieces, it was at least 2,000 Lego pieces.
6 more people.
I built it by myself in only 3 hours.
We need 5 more people.
I built about
Go ahead and start.
5,000 Lego set in 1 hour.
I'm going to have everybody mute. We're going to
No.
start. So everybody get muted except for me.
10 minutes. I built a
Yeah, now, we do have-
5,000 Lego set in 10 minutes.
But we're waiting for Callan, and we're waiting for Ella and Preston. But we're going to go ahead and start, and I'll let them in when they come. So is everybody mute? Very good. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about me. I'm going to tell you about myself and sort of my history with books. Here comes Callan. Here we go. So one of the reasons, there they go. Okay, so I want to tell you about how I became a reader and what that was like for me. I lived a lot longer ago than in my childhood was a long time ago. So I grew up in Austin, Texas, and my parents and I grew up with my mother and my grandparents in the same house. My grandparents came from a very wealthy and very educated family that had been through very difficult times, and they lost all their money. They weren't wealthy anymore, but they were very, very educated, and they knew a lot about books and scholarliness, and they had a lot of college degrees. And the one thing they wanted for me and my sisters and brothers was to have a good education. They didn't really care if we were a little bit on the poor side. We did live in a very beautiful, large house that a lot of my friends thought was like a palace. It was very tall. It had 4 floors to it. It stood on a beautiful hill that overlooked a forest and a park. And we had some beautiful things in it, and yet it was almost bare. That's one thing that you could tell we weren't rich anymore. In fact, I have never been. By the time I was born, they had lost their money because of many, many difficult circumstances that were unexpected. So I think that I grew up in the best possible world because I think money can make you be a little bit like the president. And remember how really sweet those little girls were, that she stayed with. I think,
Abigail, I can't hear. Please unmute.
who is this?
Abigail, I can't hear at all because Abigail keeps moving.
Oh, Abigail, are you not muted, honey? Make sure you mute. There you go. All right, so Liam, put your hand down for a little while, and maybe later on. So my grandfather was very, very educated. He had 3 PhDs from 3 major universities in the country. He was very highly respected and important. People used to come to our house all the time just to meet him. And then one day he got hit by a drunk driver, and he was brain damaged, and he had to learn how to talk and everything all over again. But his education didn't go away, but he didn't know how to speak. He couldn't express what was going on in his head. So he actually kept on reading books. Writing books even, and he was published, but he couldn't express himself. And so he lost his job, and that's one reason why we became poor. Another reason is because their home burned down and everything in it. All their riches burned to the ground, and all their wealth was destroyed by fire. I think it's interesting, though, that God gave me very, very wealthy grandparents with wealthy education and wealthy manners. And then before I was born, he decided to take their money away. Don't you think that's almost like a fairy tale? In other words, God did not want me to have the possessions, the gold, the silver, the wealth. But he still wanted me to have the education and the godly character that they gave me. And so I was actually as lucky as any little princess. And the truth is, they raised me a bit like a princess. And by that, I mean, they wanted me to have perfect manners. They wanted me to have a perfect education. They wanted me to wear clothes that were well made and to always act like a young lady, like Aunt Jane wanted Sylvia to act. But I was like Bonnie. I was a good girl. I loved God and I loved my family, but I was a stinker. I got in all kinds of mischief, and I was very bold. I was a lot like Bonnie. Now, my little sister was like Sylvia, and she and I were together all the time. So all my memories are about my little sister and myself, and I've written a lot of stories about it, and I might let you read one once. Liam, go ahead and put your hand down. This just isn't a talking time yet. So when my grandfather had his accident and he couldn't work anymore, somebody had to make money. My mother did not have a husband, and she did not have a job yet. She had to go back to school. And so my grandmother had to be the one who made money. And she had always been a rich man's wife, and she had never had a job. But she did have an education. And so she went to become the librarian at the Texas State School for the Blind. That meant she worked at a school for blind people. It's a very large, beautiful building in Austin, Texas, very old and very ornate and elaborate, extremely old building where blind children lived and went to school. They lived there too. And every summer, I would go to her blind school and help her. And I would sit in classes with the blind children, and they did kind of scare me because they touched my face a lot in order to see what I look like. And so all kinds of strange children are always touching my face. And it kind of scared me a little bit. And they made funny noises because a lot of them were deaf, and so they talked oddly too. But since she was a librarian for the blind school, all her books in the library were Braille, those little bumps that blind people can read. that so they don't have to use their eyes, they can use their fingers. And she taught me how to read Braille. So I could read Braille as a child. I don't think I could anymore. It's been so long. And the books are very large because it took a lot more room to have it printed in Braille than it did in print. Well, since all the school is blind, she had a lot of old, gorgeous, beautiful books, and nobody could read them. So my grandmother picked out the best of them and brought them to our home. And they lived in my house. Now, Eli's going to be jealous. And I had bookshelves and bookshelves and bookshelves, floor to ceiling, tall bookshelves of old books. And I read them and read them and read them and read them. And those books were older books. I have quite a collection today. I still have a lot of them. In fact, my whole house, Eli, is covered in bookshelves with old books. And actually, I fell in love with old books because those are the ones I first read. But now I didn't know that one day they'd be quite valuable. So I have a house full of valuable old books. Books that once upon a time might have cost $5 and now they cost $500 because they're antiques now. They're antiquated. Well, I particularly liked books that were written by British authors, English authors, and Scottish authors. And almost all the books I read were those. I'm not sure if maybe those are the kind my grandmother brought me. You know, I only read the books she gave me to read. We didn't go to the library till I was older. So I read all her books, and they were almost all English literature from England, and Scotland. Now, when I was in elementary school, this is a weird story. I was tested, and the school found my sister and I to be extremely intelligent. In fact, they thought we were geniuses. Now, I didn't know that. They told my mother that, but she kept it a secret because she did not want us to be proud children or arrogant. And she was glad that we weren't rich, and she didn't want us to be proud. And I don't even know if we were that intelligent, but that's what they told her. They told her that because we'd read so many books that it seemed like we knew everything, the way sometimes we think about our Eli. So guess what they did? Now, this was very wrong. I'm very sad that it happened, but it did. They took me out of school, and they never let me be in the classroom where the other children were learning. And instead, they put me to work in the library, and I was just a little child. They also knew I was a good artist, so I made a lot of the bulletin boards for the school, and they also let me write plays and direct them for the school. We had a beautiful auditorium with a gorgeous stage. And as a child in elementary school, this is what I did with my time. But as a result, guess what? I never learned any math. I never learned any science. I never learned any history or social studies. All I learned was about reading and writing and storytelling and directing plays and doing art. And I love those things, but I never had the regular education that other children have. The kind that you have, I didn't have. So they should not have done that to me. They should not have done that to me. As a result, they did handicap me in a lot of ways and made it so that I was held back in life from some of those restraints that I was deprived as a child. But on the other hand, it caused me to become more and more and more and more a literary person, someone who understood literature, someone who adored literature and art. And that's why I became a literature major in college. That's why my daughter became an art history major. My son became a philosophy major and a history major. And that's why we just really excel in those subjects, because we really got to focus on them so much. So I'm going to share some of my favorite books with you today. And I put them on a PowerPoint so you can see some pictures. And I read all of these books, and they were very difficult. Children today don't really read these books at the same age I did. But the books weren't read at when these books were written, younger children in England were much better readers than children are today. They're not, in England, they're the same as you now. But when these books were written 100 years ago, a second grader read on about a sixth grade level, or maybe seventh grade. And a sixth grader would read on a college level. That was typical for back then. Children are not that good of readers today as they used to be. So I was able to read those books, even though I was young, and understood them. And they really actually were originally written for my age group, even though now they would be recommended for an older person. But I think some of them, y'all are such good readers, some of y'all could actually enjoy them. So I'm going to start off, and I'm going to share my screen. And I'm going to start off the first book and these are just some of them. These are not all of my favorite books. I just didn't have a lot of time today, and I was in a hurry to get this slideshow ready for y'all, and I couldn't pull all my favorites off the shelf. We wouldn't have time to talk about them anyway if I wanted to do that many. This is one that I read called Half Magic by Edward Eager. It's a British book, and look, it's the 50th anniversary edition, and now this would be its 75th anniversary edition, because this book is now about 80 years old, and it's about some children that lived in England. This story is about a lot. It's a fantasy. It's fiction. These children were visiting. They were from London, and their parents wanted them to get out of London because London was such an unhealthy place. And so they took them out to their country home. When they lived out in the country, they had many adventures. And it turns out that their parents the father was still working in London, and the mother went and did other things, and they were kind of left alone to do some adventures. They found a coin on the sidewalk, and they picked it up, and it turned out that that coin made it so they could have wishes granted. Liam, I need you to put your hand down. So we're not going to talk yet. So whenever they didn't understand that they had it in their pocket, but they didn't know it was magic yet. A little bit like Lord of the Rings, Eli. But Lord of the Rings and this book, I think that they were written almost at the same time. So I don't think either of them copied the other one. Now, the magic that coin had was if you made a wish, you only got half your wish to come true. And so they kept finding this out accidentally. No one explained to them what was going on. And they kept getting half a wish. But they didn't even know that anything was granting their wishes. They would just say while they're playing together, I wish I was beautiful. And something would happen. This book is really, really fun. And it's got antiquated language in it. So it has vocabulary that has to be a little bit explained, just like The Wolves of Willoughby Chase. This book was written a little bit before The Wolves of Willoughby Chase, but almost in the same time period. I'd say this one is from the Edwardian period, and Wolves of Willoughby Chase is written sort of in the Victorian era. But they both take place in England, which is almost every book I ever read. That's why I know so much about England. Tate?
Snider?
Dude.
Miss Snider?
Yes. Yes, Dave.
But I know that the Wolves of Willoughby Chase probably takes place during the time of King George III, IV, and in the beginning of the Victorian era.
That's so cool. You're so right, and that's exciting. You can tell that. All right, so I'm going to, this is a picture from Half Magic, and you can kind of tell that they wish they had wings. And everything happens in this book. They get what they wish for, and then they find out that's a very terrible, scary thing, and they wish they had never wished for it. And they have to continue living with it until, I think, the sun, when the sun goes down each day, their wish disappears. So this is another book. This one was inspired. This one inspired the other one. This is called Five Children and It by E. Nesbitt. This is one of my favorite writers. I read everything this writer wrote. This one is about 4 children who lived a little bit later on. They too came from London.
But it says 5.
Oh, 5 children. Sorry, there is a 5th. It's a little baby, and she's not in this picture. So they also came from London to live out in the country, and they were digging in a sand pit behind their cottage, and they found this creature. And he is a fairy. He's called a sand fairy. And they found out that they could get wishes from him. And the way for him to grant their wishes is he had to blow up and blow up and blow up until he was enormously big. And he really is grouchy. He's a grouchy fairy. And he doesn't like these children. And he wishes they'd leave him alone and let him be buried in the sand. And he gets very mad at them. But they like him. They think he's fascinating. And he grants their wishes. He is as cross as he can be, but they can't help coming back day after day and asking for more wishes. And he gets madder every time. Here's a picture from that book. And these 4 children, there's 2 boys and 2 girls. And it reminds me a lot of the Narnia books where there's always those 4 children and a lot of the stories.
Narnia.
Okay, mute please. This one's called The Witch Family by Eleanor Estes. I read all of this author's books. They're really adorable. Now, these books are a much easier level, and this is easy for any of y'all to read. And once again, we have an interesting story about magic. I guess I loved magic when I was little. So this one is about these 2 little girls, not witches, just regular girls. And here they are. In the first chapter, they're sitting in their bedroom on a rainy day, and they're coloring pictures of things. And there's a magical bumblebee on the windowsill, but they don't know it. And his name is Malachi. And every time they wish something out loud, he has to grant it, whether he wants to or not. He doesn't even want to, but he does. And they're drawing pictures of witches. And so when they say something, it comes true. And they make friends. Now, this is the witch. She's dangerous, and she's not good, and she's not nice. She's just a mean old awful witch. And then here is a mermaid. Now, this witch has a little daughter that's a sweet little girl, and she doesn't like evil, and she doesn't like witches, and she doesn't like magic. She really just likes the 2 little girls, and she makes friends with them, and they go on adventures. And here's where they go and they meet a mermaid. And that's my favorite chapter. I bet that would be Layla's too, but she's not here today. Here is where they go to witch school, and they find out what witches do. This is one of my favorite books of all time. It's one of my very, very favorite books, and it is by my very favorite author. And it's still my favorite author. His name is George MacDonald. And George MacDonald was a Scottish preacher, a Scottish pastor, a man of God in the 1800s in Scotland. He wrote before C.S. Lewis did, and before J.R.R. Tolkien did. But J.R.R. Tolkien grew up reading all of MacDonald's books, Eli, and he loved them so much that inspired him to write all of his stuff. Now, George MacDonald had hard times. In Scotland, his family nearly starved to death once. They were very poor, but he wrote some beautiful books that help you understand about God. This book was more complicated. It has very antiquated vocabulary, but I grew up on it so young that it became very easy for me to understand the words in it. And I think Eli's probably that way too. He's read so much that there's not a lot of vocabulary that's too difficult for him at his young age. And that was true also for me. That's why I think Eli is so much like me. This is a picture of my book that I have, but I actually have about 6 different copies of this book that were printed at different times by different illustrators. And so,
What? Miss Snider?
Liam, is it very important? Because this is actually just not question time. Go ahead, tell me.
Why did you live with your grandparents?
I had a very bad father. He was a bad man, and he hurt us, and we had to run away from him and live with my grandparents. So my life is kind of like a book. It really is. In fact, it's like a fairy tale. There were a lot of really special. I had one of the most special childhoods of anybody in the world, but it had its hard things too.
And also, George McDonald didn't have a phone because he was poor.
I'd like you to mute now and be a good listener, okay? And I'm going to let y'all talk in a little while. So here are some pictures. Now, this picture right here is one that when I was pregnant with Emily Francis, I wanted, when I was thinking about having a child, she was my first child, I thought, I want my child to love God, and I want her to love reading. So I'm going to paint a picture of this Princess Irene in this story. So that is what I did. And I'm going to flip to the picture I painted in her bedroom. There it is. I did that. That is my own painting. I did it with pen and ink. Remember, I told you that I like to do pen and ink. And I wanted, when she grew up and was able to read, I wanted her to say, I want to read that book. And it worked. She did. And I think this is one, I love this author so much. Now, this book is about a princess whose mother is sick. And so the father takes her away from the palace and puts her in a beautiful mansion way out in the mountains, away from his kingdom. And then he comes and visits every once in a while, but mostly he leaves her in the house alone with servants. Well, underneath the ground in this mountain village live some goblins, and they're dangerous. And she doesn't know about it, but she discovers by exploring the house. It has many, many stairs. See her climbing up the stairs? And oops, wrong direction. And this is a different illustrator. And this book, she uses a magic cord of string that she follows through tunnels down under the earth to save a young lad who needs to be saved. Here's one of the pictures of them underground, the goblin. There's the king coming back to see her and loves her. Here is the miner boy. His father's a miner and he's a miner, and they mine every day under the ground for jewels and fine ores and minerals. And this is Curdy. The young boy's named Curdy. And Curdy and the Princess Irene become really good friends, even though he's older than her, and he treats her very protectively. And they have amazing adventures. And this is a very scary book, but it's also about beautiful things and truths about God. I love this book. It's all about how magical it is underneath, with different caves and different people that live there, and diamonds and jewels. And this is a very good book. And there's the picture I painted. I painted with pen and ink for my daughter, Emily Francis. See down there at the bottom, you can see my initials, Pamela Reniger Snider, PRS. Now, this is my favorite book in the whole wide world. Now, this is by the same writer as The Princess and the Goblin. But this one is the first one I read by this. No, it's the second one. I discovered this book in the library when I was working in my school library, when they took me out of the classroom. And I was in there all the time by myself. And one day I decided I was going to find the loneliest book in the library, and I was going to make it my friend. So I looked in all the library cards and to find one that had never been checked out ever. And it was a very old, dusty copy. You could barely read the golden letters on the front. The gold part had worn off. So I decided to read it. And it's my favorite book to this very day. It's my very favorite book, At the Back of the North Wind. And I've got 7 copies of it, all different illustrators. And when I was in college, I actually had to take college lessons in university, how to speak and read Old English, because George MacDonald's books were written in Old English and they're very hard to understand. So it's like I had to learn another language in order to enjoy him. They're very, very old, written in a very old language. It's Old English like we studied this year, and it was almost unreadable to me at first. I had to go learn how, but it was worth it. So this is the main character name is Diamond, and he's a sweet little boy. He's almost perfect. He's very poor, and he makes friends with the north wind, and she takes him on adventures, and they're very, very scary adventures about things that are happening in London. Like this is one night. There's an old lady in London who's always drunk. See the bottle of whiskey? She's always drunk, and she has a little girl, and she's terrible to the little girl. She doesn't feed her. She doesn't take care of her, and she beats her, and she makes her go outside in the middle of the cold night and sweep the streets. She's a street sweeper so that she can bring home money so she can buy more whiskey. And the little girl is really, sad. Nobody cares about her. So Diamond takes care of her. Here she is. There's the little girl, the street sweeper, and they become friends. And he starts to look after her and keep her safe. And North Wind helps. It's so good. And then here she is taking him down the stairs. Look at these, or more of the same kind of illustrations. Now can you see why that's my favorite kind of art? Because of all the books I read and the illustrators that use this type of art. And here's a picture of another. This is about there's a lot of stories in this about drunk people, because in England during this terrible time, a lot of people just were so depressed from being not able to work that they were drunk. And here's a drunk cabbie, a man who drove a cab, and he had a little baby. See his wife on the bed crying because the man comes home drunk, and she says, "Where's the money? I need to buy food." And he says, "But I spent it on whiskey." And she's going, "Oh no, my child's going to starve to death." So little Diamond is taking care of the child and feeding it. And then here's another picture of North Wind lifting him up out of the garden. North Wind can take on many sizes. She can be a teeny tiny thing or a great big large thing. Here she is with Diamond. This is a different illustrator. Here's one more book. I think it's the last one I'm going to show today. And this is one of C.S. Lewis's, The Silver Chair. This is my favorite one of the 7. Oh, I love them all. I love them.
The silver chair is kind of creepy.
Yes, I think Eli, I like those kind of creepy things that are about God, and yet they're also about danger, because it reminds me of the real battle that we are really in this life, the battle of good and evil that we live. And I think I like that George MacDonald writes about that, and C.S. Lewis writes about that, and helped me as a child to understand how to trust God and beware of evil. So studying these kind of books can help you be a Christian if they're written by the right people. These are all written to help children understand. So I love this one. I have several of this too with different illustrators. This is one about them in the silver chair, one of the pictures, and that's the end of my slideshow. So I
feel like I had seen that picture before.
Anyway, some of those books are a little too hard for you now, unless your parent wanted to read it out loud to you.
It feels like I feel like I gave.
Want to see my copy of all the books?
I feel like
my mom told my dad to get me one of the Narnia books, but then he got a huge one that's all black, and it's every single one in one big thing.
I would love. Go get it.
Okay.
So now,
I feel like I gifted teacher that.
I have almost all of my dad's Narnia books. No, my dad started reading the first one to us.
Oh,
We
good.
haven't finished.
Oh, that's the best thing, to have a parent read.
Miss Snider, look. Hold on.
Oh, so we have almost.
Mama, Miss Snider, look.
Oh,
I have a copy of the silver chair.
Yes, I love that copy. That's a good copy.
We have the whole set.
Narnia book.
Gave that one to Mrs. Snider earlier this year or something. I'm pretty sure I gave her a copy of that earlier this year.
Yes, you did, and I just treasure. Put it right in there with my treasures, David.
Yay.
That's why that picture seems so familiar.
Yes, Jason.
My dad, he has magic, and he gave me like this illusion kit, and I came up with different illusions, and one of them is a joke. I've got a trick. Get it?
Yes.
I pull something out of my sleeve like it's magic.
Okay.
And then,
let me see yours, Callan.
I have books.
Oh, that's a beautiful one. Eli, what's yours?
This is it. It used to have an illustration of Aslan on it.
Oh,
Then I lost it.
Is it an antique book? Is it an antique?
Talking about C.S. Lewis.
No, it has a lot of pages.
You better not let that
gonna
happen to me. I
savage
might steal it from you, Eli.
My dad, when he was
What?
young,
I recognize that.
Eli, you better not let me see that book. I might want to steal it.
Yes.
burn the house
Snider,
down.
look, I got Aslan.
Tate. Yes, Tate. Wait, you're not. Okay, I want everybody to mute and Ella. Everyone mute except for Tate. Okay. Yes, Tate.
Well, this is something that happened today. So we've been looking for a costume for Simon, and then I found these weird wigs, and I started putting them on, and then I found weird and then I found some fake glasses, and then put them on, and then I started looking weird.
That's like a magic day. You found something in your house you didn't even know was there.
It was in the attic.
Attics are the funnest places, aren't they? You found a real treasure. What a blast. Ella.
Can I? Never mind.
Yes. I want to know. Ella. Collins wants to know. Abigail wants to know. Tell us, Ella.
Okay, fine. Can I show you my
Yes, please. Yes, please. Collins, how about you? What is your favorite book?
Oh, that one's hard.
I like really like indentures, like Bible bells, the Bible bells. I can go get them.
Oh, yes.
Oh,
How about you, Mason?
Well, I don't have my favorite book with me. I can't find it, but I did find this book, and I think it's really cool because I just found it. I've never seen this book before.
Oh my goodness, it's a National Geographic. You'll like that.
oh yeah, baby.
You'll be fascinated with that. Alan?
Sometimes my favorite books are Drama Stilton and Guardians of Gahoot. I have almost all of the books from Guardians of Gahoot. I only need the second and third.
Lexi, what about your favorite book? Oh my goodness, Ella. Oh, look, that's gigantic.
That's the same one I had. You had the same one I had.
Yeah.
That's almost the exact same as mine. It's just huge.
Well, y'all need to hurry up and read the first one this summer. You need to read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Read that one.
I have.
The first one's not The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. The first one
Can I
is
show you my favorite book?
the first one is The Magician's Nephew.
You can
The
read
second one.
Miss
Go first.
Snider, can I show you my favorite book?
Yes, you may. Go get it. Go get it.
I already got my favorite book.
And now Mason's gonna go get his. I can see who's getting.
One's a storybook, and it's Peter Rabbit. The next one is a Minecraft guide, and it's like it says guide to creative down here at the bottom. And then something that Collins and Lexi earlier in the year they told me they would give me two things if I gave them prizes. So this one is for Lexi. The next prize
Miss Snider.
Oh, I love that book. Oh, I love The Island of the Blue Dolphins. That's a really good book.
Miss Snider.
These are my two favorite books.
Okay.
Miss Snider.
Yes, Liam.
This is my favorite book.
Oh my goodness. I bet William would love that one. Yeah.
These are my two favorites.
Okay, Collins, go get yours. Did
Miss Snider, can you see my picture?
Oh man.
Okay, everyone mute. I want to
With Deborah, and then this one with Hannah,
Bible, Women of the Bible.
and then with Esther,
Oh, Women of the Bible. Look at those.
Abigail.
Oh, that is a treasure. That's a treasure. Look at David's, the action in the Bible. That's why he knows so much.
The Action Bible and then this.
My dad has the Action Bible.
Bye, Miss Snider.
Okay, bye,
I
Lee.
have the Action Bible.
Bye.
Oh, I'm looking at Tate. He's up there with a whole lap full of books. What do you got, Tate?
Bye.
I can't find Kate on my screen. Oh, there. Now I see.
We went and got 100 books for us to look at.
I'm gonna get Calvin and Hobbes and the third book of Harry Potter illustrated version. I can't wait.
Well, there they are. Cool. Oh, watch out. 8,000 mad. Now you have to pay the price.
Okay, so Tate, tell us one of those that you love.
Well, these are all Who Was books. It's my favorite. It's one of my. It's probably my second favorite kind of book. It's all Who. These are all Who Was.
Wow, you're going to be an expert on biography.
And
You're going to know all kinds of famous people and know when they're talking about what that means. Hey, Collins, show us yours, Collins. You get it?
All right, now what?
Eli, you better not let Tate come over to your house. I think he's drooling over your book. Eli's looking kind of like, I gotta have it, gotta have it. Watch out for that guy. Miss Snider and Eli, we're book thieves. You gotta be careful.
So each of these books I got has like the bell of patience.
Oh,
So Esther is the one with patience, Anna's the one with prayer, Deborah's the one with leadership, Abigail's the one with bravery, and then my last book, Ruth is the one with loyalty.
oh, that's beautiful. Those are good books. Now, Tate's got his whole library there. Now, I'm going to ask you, Eli, about how many books do you have?
Maybe like 100.
Did you know I have 4 rooms in my house full of books? There's like, I have like 4 libraries in my house.
Can I go to your house sometime?
And they're almost all antique too. I finally stopped getting books. I will not get a book now because I know it won't fit in my house. So
Miss Snider.
I just
We should meet at Miss Snider's house. When we have a class meeting, we should meet at Miss Snider's house. So you can all see Sniffles and her 4 libraries. And see everyone in our class in person.
I want to. I want to.
I want to.
Okay, class. Now listen, tomorrow get ready to be dressed up and be ready to and let us guess who you are and make sure you've read all 12 of those pages. How many of you read all 12 of those pages I sent? Raise your hand.
I don't know what they are.
I'm gonna finish them today.
I wish I had a filter on my computer's camera that made it black and white.
Okay, well listen, I put those on an email to your parents.
Okay.
I went to a lot of trouble to make it so it's easy to read. So you do need to say, Mom, where is the email so I can read the 12 pages before tomorrow? Okay, because there's no point in us having our party tomorrow if you're not ready. You have to have read it. So raise your hand if you have already read the 12 pages. That's worrying. Now you're worrying me. I don't see everybody's hand up.
I thought you were gonna send them to us, like in mail or something.
I sent it to your mother in email the same day I told you that.
I'm going to read them right after the Zoom.
That's a perfect thing. I'm even going to let y'all go early, and you tell your parents I need that. I need to start. Okay?
Yeah.
So everybody go read. I'm going to say goodbye. Go ask your parents for the email and read.
Wait.
Okay.
Say one more
Bye,
thing.
Miss Snider.
Bye-bye.
Yesterday,
Bye.